What if I told you the most dangerous moment for your brain isn't late at night, and it isn't during exercise, and it isn't even when you feel stressed, but in the first hour after you wake up while you're doing the exact same healthy routine you've trusted for decades? Because after 60, your brain wakes up in a fragile state, and one common morning habit can quietly push your stroke risk far higher than most people ever imagine, long before you've even taken your first real breath of the day. Most people think strokes are random. One day you're fine, the next day you're in an ambulance, and everyone says it came out of nowhere. But that story makes the brain seem helpless, and it isn't. The truth is, the brain gives signals, and the body sets traps, and the morning is when those traps snap shut. The scary part is that the habits that trigger it don't look dangerous. They look normal. They look responsible. They look like the routine of a disciplined person who takes care of themselves. And that's exactly why so many older adults get blindsided. Let me take you into what's really happening inside your body as you sleep, because it sets up everything that happens next. For 6 to 8 hours, you go without fluid, you lose water through breathing, you may sweat, your kidneys still work, and as you get older, your sense of thirst becomes less reliable, so you can wake up mildly dehydrated without even realizing it. That matters because dehydration doesn't just mean dry lips. It changes your blood. It makes it thicker. It makes it move slower. It increases viscosity. And when blood thickens, your heart has to work harder to push it through vessels that, after 60, are often stiffer and less forgiving. Now, add one more piece that almost nobody talks about. The morning is when your blood pressure naturally rises. It's part of what wakes you up. Hormones like cortisol and adrenaline climb as your body shifts from sleep mode to action mode. This is normal physiology. But after 60, normal physiology can become dangerous physiology because your vessels don't stretch the way they used to. Your arteries may have plaque that's been building quietly for years. Your brain's tiny blood vessels can become more fragile. So you wake up with thicker blood and rising pressure, and your brain is depending on smooth, stable flow to get oxygen to every cell. That's the baseline. That's the starting line. And now I want you to picture the next part, because this is where a harmless looking choice can turn the first hour of your day into the most vulnerable window for your brain. You wake up, you sit up, you feel that familiar morning fog, and you think, I just need my coffee. It feels like comfort. It feels like normal life. It feels like the thing that gets you going. But here's the question I ask my older patients, especially the ones who tell me they've never had any issues and feel pretty healthy. What is the very first thing you put into your body each morning? When they say coffee, they usually smile like they're telling me a cute tradition. But when I hear it, I don't think about tradition. I think about circulation. I think about pressure. I think about dehydration. And I think about the timing that can turn caffeine into a trigger. Caffeine on an empty stomach does two things that matter a lot after 60. First, it can act like a diuretic in many people, meaning it encourages your body to lose even more fluid. If you already woke up mildly dehydrated, you're now pushing dehydration further. Second, it stimulates the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight system. That stimulation is why coffee feels energizing, but it also raises heart rate and blood pressure, sometimes sharply, especially if your body is sensitive to it. For a younger person with flexible vessels and strong reflexes, that spike might not matter. But for older adults with stiffer arteries and narrower vessels, that spike can be the difference between steady flow and chaotic flow. And chaotic flow is where strokes begin. Not because the brain just gives up, but because the conditions become perfect for something to go wrong. Thick blood is more likely to clot. Narrow vessels are easier to block. High pressure can stress delicate vessel walls. So when you combine dehydration, the natural morning pressure surge, and caffeine stimulation, you create a situation where a clot can form more easily and lodge more easily, or a vessel can be stressed at exactly the wrong time. Now, I want to slow down here, because this is where people get defensive. They think I'm saying coffee is poison. I'm not. Coffee can be part of a healthy lifestyle for many people. The issue is not coffee. The issue is timing, because your brain doesn't want stimulation the moment you wake up. It wants circulation. It wants hydration. It wants stability. And the reason this matters is that the first hour after waking is not like the rest of the day. It's a transition. And transitions are where older bodies struggle most. I remember an older patient who came to me not because he had a big dramatic stroke, but because he was having weird moments at breakfast. He'd be trying to butter toast and his hand would feel clumsy. He'd go to say a word and it would vanish. He wasn't confused all day, just briefly, and then it passed. That's the kind of story that gets brushed off as aging or stress or not sleeping well. But I've seen enough brains to know that transient symptoms like that can be the brain whispering before it screams. When we look deeper, his scans suggested small, silent events, tiny disruptions in blood flow that didn't knock him down, but left marks. The timing was always the same, shortly after waking. And the one consistent habit was that he drank strong coffee before he drank any water. When we changed that water first, then coffee later after circulation stabilized, his episode stopped. That's not magic. That's physiology. That's the brain getting what it needs in the order it needs it. And here's the unsettling part. People hear that and think, okay, I'll drink water first. That's good. But then they assume they're safe. And that assumption is exactly what gets older adults into trouble. Because coffee is only one trap in the morning, and there's another trap that looks even more harmless because it doesn't involve any bad substance at all. It involves something that feels gentle, responsible, and cautious. And it can still set the stage for clots. Think about what many older adults do right after waking. They sit on the edge of the bed. They take a breath. They check their phone. They wake up slowly. On the surface, that sounds wise. But inside your body, stillness after sleep can create a dangerous stagnation, especially in the legs. During sleep, circulation slows. Blood tends to pool more in the lower body because your muscles aren't actively pumping it upward. In younger bodies, veins and valves do a better job of maintaining flow. But after 60, those valves can weaken and elasticity can decline, which makes it easier for blood to sit and linger. If you wake up and remain still for a long time, that pooling continues. Blood becomes sluggish. The calf muscles, which act like a powerful pump when you move, remain inactive. And when blood sits still, it becomes more prone to clotting. This is the part most people don't realize. Movement is not just exercise. In the morning, movement is circulation insurance. Even small motion signals your cardiovascular system to shift safely. It helps push blood back toward the heart and brain. It stabilizes pressure. It supports oxygen delivery. But when you sit motionless, especially for long stretches, you keep your body in the worst possible halfway state, where you're awake enough for pressure and hormones to rise, but not moving enough to distribute blood flow efficiently. And that can lead to a mismatch. Your brain is asking for increased supply as it wakes up, but your body is still behaving like it's asleep. That mismatch can trigger symptoms that people misinterpret as just being groggy. They'll say, I'm slow in the morning, or my head feels cloudy, or I need time to get going. But sometimes what they're describing is underperfusion, meaning the brain isn't getting the blood flow it needs in that transition window. I treated a man who thought he was developing balance problems. Every morning, he'd sit for a long time scrolling the news because he didn't want to rush his body. Then, when he stood, he'd feel strange, vision drifting, mild trembling, mental fog. He blamed age. But when we investigated, we found signs consistent with microvascular issues, tiny disruptions that can add up. When he shortened the sitting time and added gentle movement before standing, simple ankle circles, flexing toes, rolling shoulders, it made a measurable difference in how he felt. He didn't suddenly become 30 years younger. He simply stopped starving his brain of stable flow during its most vulnerable window. Now, here's where it gets even more dangerous, because many people don't just sit. They sit and then they do the exact next thing that creates the most violent shift in morning physiology. They stand up quickly and rush to the bathroom. If you're over 60, you probably know that morning urgency is real. Sometimes you wake up needing to go immediately. It feels unavoidable. So you swing your legs out of bed, stand up fast, and head straight to the bathroom. But that transition from lying down to standing requires your cardiovascular system to adjust instantly. Gravity pulls blood downward. Your vessels must constrict, and your heart must respond to keep blood flowing to the brain. Younger bodies handle it smoothly. Older bodies often don't, because reflexes can be slower and vessels stiffer, which creates a moment of orthostatic stress where blood pressure drops when you stand. That's why so many older adults experience dizziness, blurred vision, or that whoosh feeling when they rise too quickly. And most people think that's benign. They think it's just lightheadedness. But lightheadedness in the morning is a warning sign that your brain is briefly undersupplied. And if you combine that with urgency and speed, the risk rises because you're adding stress, movement, and pressure fluctuations all at once. Then comes the part almost nobody wants to talk about, but every brain doctor understands: straining. When you urinate or have a bowel movement, especially after holding overnight, many people strain without realizing it. Straining engages a reflex that changes pressure in the chest and abdomen, and it can swing blood pressure up and down. In older adults, that is exactly the kind of instability that can precipitate vascular events. That's why so many early morning strokes and fainting episodes happen in or near the bathroom. It's not superstition, it's physiology meeting vulnerability at the wrong moment. I once saw a woman who described little blackouts in the morning, always in the bathroom, always right after she got there. She thought she was just tired. But her blood pressure readings told the story: sharp drops when standing, followed by spikes with urgency and strain. She had evidence of transient ischemic events, mini strokes, tiny warning shots. When she slowed down the transition, paused at the bedside, stood gently, breathed, and avoided rushing and straining, those episodes stopped. Again, not magic, just respecting how the older body transitions. So now we've uncovered a pattern that's starting to form, and I want you to notice it because this is the key to everything. The morning isn't dangerous because of one habit. The morning becomes dangerous because multiple habits stack on top of the same fragile baseline. Dehydration, thickened blood, rising pressure, stiffer vessels, slower reflexes, and then you add triggers: caffeine too soon, stillness too long, rushing too fast, and the risk doesn't just add up, it multiplies. Which brings me to a habit that shocks people because it's often framed as healthy in modern culture: skipping breakfast or taking morning medications on an empty stomach because you're not hungry, or because you're trying to do intermittent fasting, or because you're busy. It sounds disciplined. It sounds like control. But after 60, skipping the morning fuel your brain expects can create instability. You can't feel until it's already doing damage. During the night, your brain is still active. It uses glucose. When you wake, your brain expects replenishment. But with age, the liver may be less efficient at releasing stored glucose, and some people become more prone to low morning blood sugar. Not the dramatic kind that makes you pass out, but the subtle kind that makes the brain function on the edge. And when the brain senses low fuel, the body responds as if you're under threat. It releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline to push glucose into the bloodstream. Do you see the problem? You already have a natural morning cortisol surge. Now you're adding more. And cortisol and adrenaline raise blood pressure and constrict blood vessels. That can turn a normal morning rise into a dangerous spike. Meanwhile, low glucose can affect platelet behavior and blood consistency. And dehydration is already thickening blood, so clot risk rises further. And if you then take medications on an empty stomach, blood pressure pills, diabetes medications, anticoagulants, the absorption can be faster or the effects can be less predictable, creating swings that destabilize circulation during the exact hour you need stability most. I worked with a man who was proud of his morning routine: black coffee, no breakfast, take pills, power through. He thought he was being strong, but he started getting confusion spells, late morning, shaky hands, difficulty finding words. He assumed it was aging. When we checked his patterns, he was dipping too low in blood sugar and swinging in pressure. A scan later revealed a small event, an injury consistent with interrupted blood flow when he added a simple, small breakfast, nothing heavy, just protein and a little fat. His symptoms improved dramatically. He didn't change his entire life. He changed the stability of his morning. Now, you might be thinking, okay, water first, move gently, stand slowly, don't rush, don't skip breakfast. And if you did just those things, you would already be protecting your brain more than most people. But there's another habit that has exploded in the last decade, and it's so normalized that it doesn't even feel like a habit anymore. It feels like reality. and it can turn that natural morning surge into something far more dangerous. Starting your day with stress, news alerts, emails, social media. The phone glow before your eyes have even fully adjusted. Most people don't think of this as a stroke risk. They think of it as staying informed. But your brain doesn't interpret it as information. Your body interprets it as threat. Your morning cortisol rises to wake you up. That's normal. But when you add emotional stress, anger, fear, worry on top of that, you amplify the cardiovascular response. Your blood pressure spikes, blood vessels constrict, heart workload increases, and blood becomes stickier under stress because platelets activate more easily. If your vessels are already narrowed by age or plaque, that sudden surge can destabilize a plaque deposit, promote clotting, or stress fragile vessels. I've seen people who don't have obvious risk factors, no smoking, relatively active, who still have early morning transient symptoms because their mornings are essentially a stress test for the brain. The phone delivers a headline, the body responds with a surge, and the older brain, already fragile in that window, takes a hit. One patient told me, "Doctor, I feel my blood boil when I watch the news." That wasn't metaphor. His blood pressure log showed spikes within minutes of turning the TV on after waking. When he replaced that first 10 minutes with calm breathing and light movement, the spikes diminished and his symptoms stopped. He didn't become ignorant. He became safer. And now we arrive at a point that most people avoid because it forces them to face something uncomfortable: measurement. If the morning is the most volatile period for blood pressure after 60, then the most dangerous thing you can do is assume you're fine because you feel okay. Because blood pressure doesn't need to feel like anything. It can be dangerously high in the morning, and you can feel completely normal until the day you don't. There's a phenomenon clinicians have described for years. Morning hypertension is a powerful predictor of stroke. The surge happens before many people take medications, and medications often take time to work. So if your pressure is peaking early, your brain may be unprotected during the most unstable window. The tragedy is that many older adults only check blood pressure when they feel off, but the entire danger of blood pressure is that it can be silent while it injures the brain in micro events that accumulate over time. I had a patient who insisted his blood pressure was always fine. He checked in the evening and it looked acceptable, but something about his symptoms, brief visual changes, occasional confusion, made me suspicious. We had him measure in the morning for a week. His evening readings were stable, but his morning readings were shocking. He was surging into dangerous territory while he felt normal. Once he understood that pattern, we adjusted timing, hydration, morning movement, and his plan became protective instead of reactive. It wasn't the device that saved him. It was the truth the device revealed. Now, at this point, you may feel like your entire morning routine is under attack. And I understand that reaction because routines feel like safety. They feel like identity. But here's the real message. The morning isn't your enemy. The morning is a leverage point. It's a small window where tiny changes can have outsized effects because you're influencing the most fragile physiology of the day. And there's one more habit I want to talk about that is so deceptively gentle that people assume it can't possibly be harmful. It's the habit of spending the first hour of the morning sitting still, not just on the edge of the bed, but in a chair, on the couch, in a recliner, easing into the day. It feels peaceful. But for the vascular system after 60, prolonged stillness in that first hour can deepen stagnation, prolong thick blood pooling in the legs, delay the muscle pump that returns blood to the heart, and keep your brain in an undersupplied state longer than it should be. People often describe it as brain fog. They think it's inevitable, but fog can be a signal. It can be the brain functioning under reduced flow. And reduced flow in a body with stiff arteries and thickened morning blood is not a neutral state. It can be the state where clots form, where pressure rises to compensate, and where the brain is left vulnerable to an event that feels sudden but was building quietly. Here's what I want you to notice now, because it changes the way you see everything. None of these habits are dramatic. None of them feel like smoking a pack of cigarettes. None of them feel like a crisis. They are small, they are ordinary, they are the kinds of things people do while they're half awake, which is exactly why they're so dangerous, because the brain is most fragile when we're least attentive. And that brings us to the real question. If the first hour after waking is the highest risk hour for strokes in older adults, then what would the safest first hour look like? Not a perfect morning routine that requires discipline and willpower and expensive supplements, but a simple sequence that protects circulation and stabilizes pressure in the exact order your aging brain needs. Because there's a specific order that can turn your morning from a risk multiplier into a protection multiplier, and it starts with something almost embarrassingly simple. But most people do it in the wrong order without realizing it. And once you see the order clearly, you understand why so many healthy seniors still get blindsided. And the next thing I'm going to reveal is the single mistake people make when they try to fix these habits, the mistake that makes them think they're protected while their stroke risk stays high because they changed the wrong thing first. And that one wrong move can cancel the benefits of everything else. Here's the mistake almost everyone makes when they try to fix their mornings. They focus on one habit in isolation and assume the danger is gone. They drink a glass of water but still rush out of bed. They move a little but still start the day stressed. They eat breakfast but still sit still for an hour. And because nothing bad happens immediately, the brain relaxes and says, I guess I'm safe. But the aging brain doesn't respond to isolated fixes. It responds to sequence. Order matters more than effort. And if you get the order wrong, the risk quietly stays. The first hour after waking is not about doing more. It's about doing things in the right progression so your circulation stabilizes instead of lurching from one extreme to another. Think of your cardiovascular system like an old engine on a cold morning. You don't floor the gas the second it starts. You let it warm up. You let the oil circulate. You give the system time to adapt. When you don't, that's when damage happens. The older brain works the same way, and yet most people treat their mornings like a sprint. The safest mornings always begin with the same principle. Stabilize blood first, stimulate later. Hydration before caffeine, circulation before urgency, calm before information, fuel before medication, movement before stillness. When this order is reversed, even healthy habits can turn against you. Let's start with hydration, because this is where most people misunderstand what enough actually means. A sip of water doesn't undo overnight dehydration. The blood doesn't thin instantly. The goal in the first minutes after waking is not quenching thirst, it's restoring flow. Warm or room temperature water works better than cold because it doesn't trigger a stress response in the gut. And it doesn't need to be a large amount. A steady glass, slowly consumed, signals the body that fluid is coming and begins correcting viscosity before pressure spikes fully take hold. What matters even more than the water itself is what you don't do yet. You don't stimulate, you don't scroll, you don't rush, you give your system a chance to shift gears smoothly instead of grinding. Then comes movement. And this is where many people overthink and underdo at the same time. They imagine exercise, they imagine sweat, they imagine effort, but early morning movement for older adults is not about fitness, it's about flow. The calf muscles are one of the most important pumps in the body, especially after 60. Every ankle roll, every toe flex, every gentle march in place pushes blood upward against gravity. That action alone can dramatically improve morning brain perfusion. This movement should happen before standing fully upright, and certainly before rushing anywhere. Even 30 to 60 seconds of gentle motion while seated can change how your brain is supplied when you stand. It reduces dizziness, it reduces pressure swings, it reduces the chance that a clot sitting quietly in the legs gets the opportunity to travel upward during a sudden movement. Only after hydration and gentle movement does standing become safe. And even then, standing should be deliberate, not reactive. A pause at the bedside, a breath, letting the system catch up. This is not weakness. This is wisdom. It is giving your heart and vessels the few extra seconds they need to respond appropriately instead of lagging behind gravity. Now, here's where urgency sabotages everything. The rush to the bathroom, the panic of, I have to go now. For many older adults, this feels unavoidable, but urgency itself increases risk. When urgency rises, breathing changes. Muscles tense, pressure fluctuates. The body enters a mini stress response. If you stack urgency on top of dehydration, poor circulation, and sudden standing, you've recreated the perfect storm. This is why slowing the transition matters even more than the destination. The brain does not care that you're heading to the bathroom. It cares how you get there. A slower walk with steady breathing is safer than a hurried shuffle with shallow breaths and tension, and straining should never be the first act of the day. If you feel that urge, pause, breathe, let your body settle. The few extra moments can prevent massive swings in pressure that aging vessels cannot tolerate well. After circulation stabilizes, then fuel matters. Breakfast for older adults is not about calories or tradition, it's about preventing hormonal chaos. A small amount of protein and fat stabilizes blood sugar and dampens excessive cortisol release. This reduces pressure spikes and protects blood vessels from sudden constriction. The brain doesn't need a feast. It needs predictability. This is also where medications become safer. When taken with food, absorption is steadier, effects are smoother, pressure drops are less dramatic. The system is buffered instead of shocked. This alone can reduce morning instability in people who have been doing everything right but still feel off in the late morning. Now let's talk about the habit that undermines all of this, even when everything else is done correctly. Stress exposure too early. Stress is not just emotional, it's physiological. The body does not distinguish between a predator and a headline that triggers fear or anger. Both activate the same pathways. In the morning, those pathways are already active. Adding more is like pouring gasoline on a fire that was meant to burn low and controlled. 10 minutes of calm after waking can do more for stroke prevention than many supplements people spend money on. Calm breathing slows heart rate. It softens vessels. It allows blood flow to normalize before stimulation begins. This is not about meditation perfection. It's about not attacking your nervous system before it's ready. Only after the body is hydrated, moving, fueled, and calm does stimulation become appropriate. Coffee, news, conversation, planning. These are not forbidden. They are simply safer later. When circulation is stable, the same stimulus that was dangerous earlier becomes tolerable. Timing changes everything. And this leads us to a concept that almost no one discusses, but it explains why so many strokes feel sudden, even though they were predictable. The brain rarely fails because of one extreme act. It fails because of repeated exposure to unstable conditions. Tiny injuries accumulate, microclots form and dissolve, pressure spikes, stress vessel walls again and again. Over years, resilience erodes. Then one morning, under the same routine, something crosses the threshold. This is why so many people say, but I've done this for years. That statement is exactly the warning sign. Aging changes tolerance. What was neutral at 50 can be dangerous at 70. The routine didn't change. The body did. Morning blood pressure measurement fits into this picture not as a diagnostic obsession, but as feedback. It tells you whether your morning sequence is protective or harmful. High readings in the morning are not a moral failure. They are information. They tell you the system is under strain before medication has time to help. Without that knowledge, people are flying blind through the most dangerous window of the day. What's especially troubling is how many silent injuries happen without symptoms. Microinfarcts don't cause paralysis. They don't make headlines. They quietly degrade memory, balance, and processing speed. People blame age, but the brain remembers every insult, even the ones you never felt. And the morning is when many of those insults occur. This is why prolonged stillness in the morning is so deceptive. Sitting feels safe, but stillness allows stagnation to persist. Blood pools. Oxygen delivery lags. Pressure compensates upward. The brain operates underpowered. Over time, that pattern contributes to decline that feels gradual and inevitable, but often isn't. Movement doesn't need to be dramatic. 5 minutes of light activity can transform circulation. Standing, walking, gentle stretching, even light household movement signals the body to distribute blood properly. The goal is not fatigue. The goal is flow. Now, here's the hardest truth to accept, and it's the one most people resist. Protecting the aging brain requires letting go of how mornings used to feel. The idea of rolling out of bed and immediately getting on with the day belongs to a younger body. After 60, mornings require intention. Not fear, not obsession, intention. This is not about living cautiously. It's about living intelligently. The brain you have now is not the brain you had at 40. It is wiser, but it is also more vulnerable to instability. Respecting that reality is not surrender, it's strategy. Every older patient I've seen who avoided a major event after warning signs shared one thing in common. They didn't wait for catastrophe to force change. They listened to subtle signals: morning fog, dizziness, brief confusion, hand clumsiness, vision changes. These are not just age until proven otherwise. They are messages from a brain under stress. And here's the hopeful part that people need to hear. The brain responds remarkably well to improved stability. When circulation improves, symptoms often recede. When pressure stabilizes, risk drops. When mornings become protective instead of chaotic, the entire day improves. Energy increases. Clarity improves. Confidence returns. People feel younger, not because they reversed age, but because they stopped injuring their brain every morning without realizing it. So now, the question becomes unavoidable. Tomorrow morning, will you repeat the same sequence out of habit, or will you change the order in a way that protects your future? Because the difference is not dramatic. It's subtle, it's quiet, and it's powerful. And in the next part, I'm going to walk you through exactly how to design a safe first hour after waking that fits real life, not perfection. A sequence that works even if you wake up late, even if you need the bathroom urgently, even if you love your coffee, even if you hate routines, because there is a way to protect your brain without turning your morning into a medical ritual. But before we go there, there's one more uncomfortable truth you need to understand. There are people who do everything right in the morning and still remain at high risk because of one overlooked factor that quietly cancels out all their good habits. And unless you recognize it, you can follow every rule and still be vulnerable. That factor is hiding in plain sight, and it's the reason some seniors feel frustrated when they do all the right things but still feel off. Once you see it, the entire picture will finally make sense. The overlooked factor that quietly cancels out all those good morning habits is this: inconsistency. Not laziness, not ignorance, inconsistency. The aging brain does not respond to what you do once in a while. It responds to what you do repeatedly, especially during the same vulnerable window each day. And this is where many well-intentioned seniors unknowingly sabotage themselves. They hydrate some mornings, but not others. They move gently on weekdays, but rush on weekends. They eat breakfast when they feel like it and skip it when they don't. And because nothing dramatic happens on the off days, the brain keeps absorbing small hits that add up over time. The brain after 60 is less forgiving of irregular stress. It thrives on predictability. Stable mornings teach the cardiovascular system what to expect. Vessels adapt. Pressure responses smooth out. Circulation becomes more reliable. But chaotic mornings force the system to relearn every day, and relearning under stress is exactly when things break. This explains why some people say, "Doctor, I did everything you said, but I still don't feel right." When we look closer, what we often find is not failure, but variability. One rushed morning can undo the benefits of several calm ones. One dehydrated start can negate days of good flow. One high-stress morning can destabilize plaque that's been quietly sitting there for years. This is also why strokes feel unfair. People remember the good days. They forget the rushed ones. The body remembers everything. There's another layer to this that rarely gets discussed, and it's deeply uncomfortable because it challenges a popular belief. Many older adults assume that being physically active later in the day compensates for a chaotic morning. They think, "I exercise," or "I walk every afternoon, so the morning doesn't matter as much." But from a neurological perspective, that's not how risk works. Morning physiology is unique. Blood is thicker, pressure is rising, hormones are peaking, vessels are transitioning. Damage that occurs in that window is not erased by a walk at 4 p.m. Exercise is protective overall, but it does not rewind a dangerous first hour. This is why some very active seniors still suffer morning strokes. They are fit, but their mornings are hostile to their circulation. Another overlooked element is sleep fragmentation. Many older adults wake multiple times at night, often to urinate. Each awakening slightly disrupts blood pressure rhythms and stress hormone balance. By morning, the system is already taxed. That makes the order of morning habits even more important. When sleep has been fragmented, the margin for error is smaller. The brain needs gentler transitions, not harsher ones. This is also why feeling okay is not a reliable guide. The brain can compensate impressively until it can't. People often feel fine right up until an event. That doesn't mean nothing was happening. It means the brain was adapting silently, absorbing stress until capacity was exceeded. One of the most dangerous beliefs I hear is, if something was wrong, I would feel it. That belief is comforting, but it's false. High blood pressure doesn't hurt. Thick blood doesn't ache. Narrowing vessels don't announce themselves. The brain doesn't scream until damage is significant. That's why awareness, not sensation, must guide behavior after 60. Now, let's talk about something that makes people uncomfortable, because it feels personal. The first hour of the morning is often when people are alone with their thoughts. For some, that's when anxiety surfaces. For others, it's when worries replay. This mental environment has a physiological cost. Repetitive anxious thinking increases sympathetic nervous system activity, raises cortisol, and tightens blood vessels. When this happens daily during the most vulnerable hour, it quietly raises stroke risk even in people who eat well and move. This doesn't mean you need to be cheerful or fake positivity. It means you need to avoid mental escalation before your body's ready. The brain doesn't need answers in the first 10 minutes. It needs oxygen. This is where breathing becomes more than relaxation. Slow, deliberate breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which counteracts the morning stress surge. It lowers heart rate, it softens vessels, it improves cerebral blood flow. This is not spiritual advice, it's vascular mechanics. 5 slow breaths can measurably change blood flow patterns in the brain. Another mistake people make is trying to fix everything at once. They overhaul their routine, feel overwhelmed, then revert back. The brain doesn't need perfection, it needs reliability. 1 or 2 consistently protected steps in the right order can dramatically lower risk. The worst routine is not the imperfect one, it's the one that changes every day. Let's connect all of this to something very practical. Many strokes don't occur during exertion. They occur during transitions, getting out of bed, going to the bathroom, standing after sitting. These are moments when circulation shifts rapidly. When the system is already stressed, transitions become dangerous. When the system is stabilized first, transitions become safe. This is why a protected morning doesn't mean moving slowly all day. It means slowing down until circulation is stable. After that, normal life can resume. The danger window closes once blood flow, pressure, and oxygen delivery have settled. Now, there's a final misunderstanding that needs to be corrected because it keeps people stuck. Many seniors believe that paying attention to stroke risk means living in fear. They think monitoring, adjusting routines, and slowing transitions will make them anxious. But the opposite is true. Anxiety comes from unpredictability. Confidence comes from understanding. People who understand their mornings feel safer, not weaker. They know why they pause. They know why they hydrate first. They know why they don't rush. Knowledge replaces fear with intention. And here's something I want you to really hear. Stroke prevention after 60 is not about avoiding life. It's about preserving it. It's about protecting the brain that holds your memories, your personality, your independence. Every small morning decision is either a deposit or a withdrawal from that reserve. So now we've identified the real enemy, not coffee, not sitting, not news, not fasting by themselves, but unstable sequences repeated inconsistently during the most vulnerable hour of the day. And once you see that, the solution becomes much clearer. In the next part, I'm going to give you a realistic, flexible first hour framework that works even if you wake up late, even if you don't sleep well, even if you have urgency, even if you hate routines. Not a rigid checklist, but a principle-based approach that adapts to real mornings. Because the goal is not to control your life. The goal is to protect your brain quietly, effortlessly, and consistently so that years from now, you're still thinking clearly, moving confidently, and living independently. And there's one final insight about aging brains and morning risk that almost no one talks about. But once you understand it, you'll never look at your mornings the same way again. Here is the final insight that ties everything together, and once you understand it, your mornings will never look the same again. The aging brain is not primarily threatened by weakness. It is threatened by shock, sudden changes, sudden demands, sudden pressure, sudden stimulation. What protects the brain after 60 is not strength or discipline, but smoothness, continuity, gentle transitions that keep blood flow steady instead of forcing it to lurch. This is why the first hour after waking carries so much weight. It is the largest physiological transition your body makes every day, from unconscious to conscious, from low pressure to rising pressure, from stillness to movement, from fasting to feeding, from silence to stimulation. And every one of those shifts asks something of your blood vessels, your heart, and your brain. When those requests come all at once, the system strains. When they come in sequence, the system adapts. That is the difference between a morning that quietly injures the brain and a morning that quietly protects it. So let's bring this into real life, because this is not about creating a perfect routine. It's about creating a safe order that works even on imperfect days. You wake up before stimulation, you hydrate. Not because water is magical, but because blood flow needs thinning before pressure peaks. Before rushing, you move gently, not to exercise, but to activate circulation and prevent stagnation. Before urgency, you pause, because pausing gives your cardiovascular reflexes time to engage instead of lagging. Before stress, you allow calm, because stress hormones are already high and don't need reinforcement. Before medication, you give the body fuel, because stability prevents swings. Before sitting for long periods, you create flow, because stillness is only safe after circulation has stabilized. Notice what this does. It doesn't slow your entire day. It protects the most dangerous window so the rest of the day can unfold normally. This is why people who adopt these changes often say something surprising. They don't just feel safer, they feel clearer. Mornings become less foggy. Balance improves. Energy becomes more consistent. That's not psychological. That's blood flow. And here's the most empowering truth of all. Stroke risk is not only about genetics or fate. It is profoundly influenced by daily conditions, especially morning conditions. When you stabilize those, you don't just reduce the risk of catastrophic events, you reduce the accumulation of silent injuries that slowly erode cognition, memory, and independence. This is why so many older adults who never had a stroke still experience decline. The brain can be injured quietly, repeatedly, invisibly, and the morning is where many of those injuries begin. But the reverse is also true. Protection compounds, stability compounds. Gentle mornings build resilient brains. You don't need to fear your mornings. You need to respect them. You don't need to control every variable. You need to control the sequence. And once you do, your body often rewards you quickly because it has been waiting for relief from years of unnecessary stress. So tomorrow morning, when you wake up, remember this. Your brain is asking for patience before performance, for flow before force, for calm before stimulation. If you give it that, you are not just starting your day, you are protecting your future. And that is the quiet power of understanding how the aging brain truly works.